Nobody warned Diane Alcott that the quiet man with the beat-up Ford F-150 was the most dangerous person she'd ever crossed. But she was about to find out the hard way. Marcus Webb didn't move into Sycamore Ridge to make friends. He moved in quietly on a Tuesday in late October, carrying boxes himself, nodding politely to the neighbors who peeked through curtains. He was 44, broad-shouldered, with calloused hands and a face that had seen too much sun and not enough sleep. He wore a faded army cap, drove a dented black truck that had a crack in the passenger side mirror, and kept his lawn trimmed to regulation without anyone asking. He was exactly the kind of man people underestimate. Quiet, humble, invisible almost. He liked it that way. His neighbor across the street, Tom Briggs, brought over a six-pack the first weekend and warned him over the fence with a grim smile. Watch out for number 14. She runs this neighborhood like it's her personal kingdom. Marcus cracked open a can and nodded slowly. I've handled worse, he said. Tom just laughed like that was the funniest thing he'd heard all year. Diane Alcott had lived at 14 Sycamore Ridge Drive for 11 years. She was the HOA president, the block captain, and, in her own mind, the last line of defense between a civilized neighborhood and complete suburban chaos. She was impeccably dressed, always. Hair set, clipboard in hand, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She had gotten 3 families fined into selling their homes. She had blocked a wheelchair ramp installation because it was aesthetically inconsistent with community standards. She had sent a cease and desist to a 10-year-old running a lemonade stand because it violated the no solicitation policy. She didn't see herself as cruel. She saw herself as necessary. The first time she spotted Marcus's truck parked 2 inches past his property line, 2 inches, measured personally with a tape measure she kept in her purse. Her jaw tightened. She wrote the violation notice herself, slid it under his door at 7 a.m. Marcus read it, set on the kitchen counter, and moved the truck. He didn't say a word. Diane took that as submission. That was her first mistake. Over the next 6 weeks, Diane found reasons to cite Marcus every few days. A recycling bin left out an hour past collection. A garden hose coiled incorrectly near the side yard. A porch light with the wrong color temperature. She'd actually looked that up in the HOA bylaws, highlighted it, and photographed his bulb with her phone. Each time, Marcus corrected the issue without complaint. Each time, Diane escalated. He's hiding something, she told the HOA board at their November meeting, arms crossed, voice clipped. Men like that don't just take it quietly unless they have something to lose. Board member Patrice Monroe shifted uncomfortably. Diane, the man hasn't done anything wrong. Not yet, Diane said, cutting her off. The night before Thanksgiving, Marcus had 2 of his adult sons visiting. They parked on the street, legally, in front of his house. Diane photographed every angle of both vehicles, muttering notes into her phone. One of his sons, a young man in a Navy uniform, waved at her from the driveway. She didn't wave back. Thanksgiving morning, 6:47 a.m. Marcus came outside in his jacket to warm up the truck. Gone. He blinked, looked up and down the empty street. His black F-150, the one with the cracked mirror and the American flag decal, was gone. A towing sticker was plastered to his recycling bin. Unauthorized overnight parking. Hwaodi nan bai bon bay. Towing authorized by D. Alcott, HOA president. His sons came out behind him. The one in the Navy uniform stared at the sticker. Dad, she towed your truck. On Thanksgiving. Marcus stood very still for a long moment. His jaw worked slowly. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Not to the tow company. Not to a lawyer. He called someone who picked up on the first ring. Hey, he said quietly. It's time. Here is what nobody on Sycamore Ridge knew about Marcus Webb, because he had never told anyone and had never needed to. Before the Army. Before the quiet retirement. Before the beat-up truck and the faded cap. Marcus Webb's grandfather had purchased 12 acres of undeveloped land in what was now central Sycamore Ridge in 1974. When the development company came knocking in 2003, Marcus, then 21 and fresh out of basic training, had reviewed the deal from overseas and rejected it. Instead, he negotiated something far more unusual, a permanent land trust that retained subsurface and easement rights across the entire eastern section of Sycamore Ridge Drive, including the road itself. The city had built over it. The HOA had formed on top of it. But nobody had ever contested the underlying deed because nobody had ever looked. The original title search had missed a recorded covenant, buried in county records from 1978. Marcus had known about it for 20 years. He'd never used it. Until now. His call that Thanksgiving morning was to his attorney, a real estate litigator named Sandra Okafor, who had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment for 3 years, at Marcus's quiet instruction. File it, he said. By Monday, Sycamore Ridge had a certified letter problem. Every member of the HOA board received a legal notice. The city planning department received a notice. The towing company received a notice. And Diane Alcott received a hand-delivered letter at 8 a.m., signed by Sandra Okafor, ESQ, on firm letterhead 2 pages thick. The core finding was simple and devastating. The easement Marcus's family held meant that Sycamore Ridge Drive, the actual asphalt road in front of his house, the one Diane's tow truck had driven down at 4 a.m., was not fully public. It crossed private trust land. Any vehicle removal ordered by the HOA using that road, without the landowner's permission, constituted unauthorized use of private property. Diane's towing order was, legally, a trespass. Patrice Monroe called her that afternoon, voice shaking. "Diane, do you understand what this means? He can block road access. He can challenge every citation you've issued through that easement zone. He could potentially invalidate the last 2 years of HOA enforcement actions if a judge agrees." Diane's voice, for the first time in 11 years on Sycamore Ridge, went very small. "That's not possible," she whispered. "His grandfather bought this land before your HOA existed," Patrice said. "It's very possible." The December HOA meeting was standing room only. Word had gotten out, the way it always does in close neighborhoods, and people showed up who hadn't attended a meeting in years. The woman whose wheelchair ramp had been blocked. The family that had been fined out of their home. Tom Briggs, with his arms folded and a look of absolute satisfaction on his face. Marcus sat in the back row in his army cap. He didn't say a word until Diane, pale and visibly shaken, tried to introduce a motion to table discussion on ongoing legal matters. Someone called out from the crowd, "Let him speak." The room went quiet. Marcus stood up slowly. He looked around at his neighbors, people he'd waved at, people who'd watched him be harassed for months. And when he finally spoke, his voice was calm and low and carried across the entire room. "I didn't come here to destroy anything," he said. "I came here to live in peace. I tried to do that quietly. I tried to comply. I moved the truck. I changed the bulb. I recoiled the garden hose." He paused. "But you towed my truck on Thanksgiving morning, in front of my sons." The silence was absolute. "I accepted the board's resignation before I walked in here tonight," Sandra Okafor said from beside him, producing a document, including the president's. "Effective immediately. The easement matter will be resolved in mediation on terms favorable to Mr. Webb." Diane Alcott stood at the front of the room for one long, terrible moment. Then she gathered her clipboard, her binder, and 11 years of authority, and she walked out of that meeting to the sound of absolute silence. Not applause, not jeering, just silence. Because some reckonings don't need noise. Marcus drove his truck home that night, retrieved from the tow yard at the company's expense, and parked it exactly where he always did, 2 inches past the property line. He left it there. Nobody said a word.